What if I told you that a single phone call, or rather, a series of unanswered ones, became the invisible wedge that drove two royal women into a feud that would echo across the world? Picture it. Meghan Markle, once the dazzling new star of the monarchy, clutching her phone in desperation. On the other side, Kate Middleton, calm, composed, and reportedly refusing to pick up. A tiara was at the center of it all. Not just a glittering jewel, but a crown-shaped symbol of who belonged and who did not. Tonight, we dive into the story of how one woman's silence became another woman's humiliation, and how that silence may have spoken louder than any scandalous headline ever could. Let's start with a question. Why would a duchess, married to a prince, adored by millions, photographed on every magazine cover, be left begging for something as seemingly superficial as a tiara? Why would Meghan Markle, a woman who had conquered Hollywood, be reduced to pacing around with a phone in her hand, calling Kate Middleton of all people? And why, according to those who claim to know the truth, did Kate decide to cut her off, refusing to answer even when Meghan's requests turned into pleas? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Because this isn't really about diamonds or emeralds. It isn't about glittering headpieces pulled from the Queen's vault. This is about power, about belonging, about the monarchy's invisible boundaries, and what happens when someone tries to cross them. The Tiara War, as it's been dubbed, is more than a petty squabble. It's the story of how Meghan, desperate to cement her royal role, reached out for what she believed would prove her place at the top table. And Kate, ever the strategist, ever the guardian of tradition, allegedly responded with silence. A silence that not only crushed Meghan's hopes, but also reinforced where the line was drawn. Think about this. Meghan's world before Harry was one of cameras, scripts, red carpets, and award shows. Glamour? Yes, but a glamour that was bought, styled, and managed. When she stepped into the royal fold, she thought she was trading one kind of spotlight for another. She assumed her new world would come with crowns, tiaras, and all the trappings of royal fairy tales. And in her mind, why wouldn't it? She had married a prince. She had become the Duchess of Sussex. She had entered the storybook. But reality wasn't a fairy tale. It was frostier, colder, laced with rules, traditions, and unspoken hierarchies. And Meghan was about to find out that a glittering tiara wasn't just an accessory. It was an inheritance, a mark of acceptance. And in her case, it was a symbol withheld. The story, as insiders whisper it, begins in the tense months leading up to Meghan's wedding. Imagine the chaos. Gowns being fitted, guest lists scrutinized, family dramas spilling into the press. Amid all that, Meghan fixated on a crown. She wanted to shine, not just as a bride, but as a royal bride worthy of history's pages. Her chosen tiara, the sparkling Queen Mary's bandeau, wasn't just decoration. It was, in her eyes, the jewel that would cement her as part of the dynasty. But here's where the cracks began to show. Meghan wanted more say. She wanted more choice. And, according to rumors, she wanted more flexibility than the royal vault, or those guarding it, were willing to allow. There are whispers of clashes with Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser and fiercely protective gatekeeper of the jewels. There are accounts of raised voices, tense exchanges, even Harry stepping in with his infamous, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets" line. But behind that storm, one quieter detail emerged. Meghan, not satisfied with the options, not appeased by explanations, allegedly reached out to Kate. Yes, Kate, the woman she was supposed to be building a warm sisterhood with. The woman who, to Meghan, seemed to have it all: jewels, titles, respect, the certainty of being future queen. Meghan reportedly picked up her phone, called Kate, and asked for help. Now pause here and think. Why Kate? Was Meghan hoping Kate would be the bridge between her and the palace machine? Was she hoping Kate would lend her a tiara directly, bypassing the courtiers and Angela Kelly's iron grip? Or was this a power play, Meghan daring to touch the untouchable, to claim the kind of intimacy with Kate that would rewrite their dynamic? Because if Meghan thought Kate would sympathize, she was wrong. The story goes that Kate didn't just refuse to engage, she didn't pick up at all. Ring after ring, call after call, silence. Kate, the poised and dutiful duchess, reportedly ignored Meghan entirely. Some say she saw it as inappropriate, even audacious. Others believe Kate was acting under the Queen's guidance, protecting the royal line, refusing to let Meghan sidestep the rules. And this is where the emotional core of our story lives. Imagine Meghan's frustration. A woman who had always found ways around obstacles suddenly running into an immovable wall. A Hollywood actress turned duchess who could summon agents, producers, assistants, now standing powerless before silence. Her new sister-in-law, who could have answered with grace, instead delivered the harshest answer of all: none. This is why the tale of the unanswered calls resonates. Because it strips away the glamour and lays bare the human feelings underneath: rejection, humiliation, rivalry. Think of Meghan waiting, phone in hand, hoping Kate would relent. Think of Kate, perhaps sipping tea in Kensington Palace, deliberately choosing not to answer. One woman desperate to belong. The other, perhaps already certain that Meghan never truly would. Why does this matter now? Because the tension it sowed didn't end with the wedding. It didn't end with the tiara. That single silence became the seed of a feud that blossomed into open war. Netflix deals, Oprah revelations, royal estrangements, and icy stares at funerals. And if you trace that war back far enough, some say it begins here, with Meghan's unanswered calls. Now let's address the irony. Meghan once played characters who schemed and clawed their way to the top in glossy legal dramas. She knew the power of optics, the thrill of winning. Yet in real life, she was losing to silence. Kate, the so-called unremarkable commoner, who had been mocked for years as Weighty Katie, was now the one holding the cards. Meghan, glamorous, outspoken, fiercely ambitious, was the one left begging. And isn't that the cruelest twist? The woman who married the heir's spare, asking for favors from the woman who married the heir. One grasping for jewels, the other wearing her crown of restraint. But here's the question I want you to hold on to. Was Kate's silence cruelty, or was it strategy? Was she punishing Meghan, or was she simply protecting the sanctity of the monarchy? Was she playing a personal game, or was she serving the crown itself? As we peel back the layers of this story, you'll see that the unanswered phone calls weren't a minor incident. They were a turning point. They were the moment Meghan realized she couldn't charm her way past the traditions of the House of Windsor. And they were the moment Kate established herself as the immovable wall Meghan would crash against again and again. And so, as Meghan stared at her unanswered phone, what seemed like a simple refusal became something much bigger, a silent battle line, drawn in the quiet ring of a telephone. But what came next wasn't just about a tiara. It wasn't even just about two women caught in a silent rivalry. What happened after those unanswered calls would explode into a family rift, a media firestorm, and a battle that still shakes the monarchy to this day. Because the unanswered calls were only the beginning, and the fallout would be far more devastating than Meghan ever imagined. Have you ever stopped to think about why a tiara matters? I mean, really matters. To most people, a tiara is a glittering accessory, a piece of jewelry for brides, pageants, or costume parties. But in the British monarchy, a tiara is far more than an ornament. It is a key, a silent, sparkling declaration that says, "You belong. You are trusted. You are one of us." And that is exactly why Meghan Markle's hunger for one, and Kate Middleton's alleged refusal to let her near it, cut deeper than the public ever knew. The British crown jewels are more than treasure. They are a vault of history. Each tiara, each diadem, carries centuries of meaning. Some were worn by queens at coronations, others gifted to princesses as wedding presents. They're not just passed down, they're guarded, curated, rationed out like priceless secrets. Wearing one is not just about looking royal. It is a rite of passage, a symbol of acceptance into an ancient, almost mystical order. And that's where Meghan's story begins to unravel. Because when Meghan came into the royal family, she expected the tiara to be part of the deal. She wasn't naive. She had studied the imagery, the weddings, the history. She had seen Kate, radiant at her 2011 wedding, crowned with the Cartier halo tiara, sparkling under the Westminster Abbey lights. Meghan imagined her own fairy tale, her own crowning moment. But behind the palace doors, things weren't that simple. In fact, the crown jewels themselves became the very weapons of her exclusion. Let's rewind for a moment. Kate Middleton's path to her tiara moment was long and meticulous. Nearly a decade of courtship with Prince William, public scrutiny, waiting, and enduring the nickname Weighty Katie. But when she finally stood at the altar, the tiara she wore was no accident. The Cartier Halo tiara, delicate, elegant, understated, it reflected the palace's carefully controlled image of her. She was accepted. She was safe. She was worthy of being adorned with the jewels of Queen's past. Now contrast that with Meghan. She didn't spend a decade easing her way into the family. She came in like a storm. An American actress. Divorced. Mixed race. Independent. Loud, some said. And while she brought glamour, she also brought disruption. So when it came to the question of which tiara she would wear, insiders say it was never just a matter of fashion. It was a test. A subtle yet brutal question. Does she belong, or doesn't she? Think about it. Why did the palace care so much about which tiara Meghan wore? Why did Meghan care so much about being given options? Because, dear viewer, the tiara wasn't just a jewel. It was a throne in miniature. A crown you could wear on your wedding day to prove your place in the dynasty. And this is where things heated up. Meghan wanted choices. She wanted flexibility. She wanted to try on different tiaras from the Queen's vault, to feel the weight of history on her head, to choose something that represented her. But according to whispers, Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, was the gatekeeper. And she wasn't budging. No extra fittings. No late-night calls. No exceptions. Meghan, used to stylists and Hollywood privilege, was shocked. And Harry? He was furious. This was his wife, his bride, his duchess-to-be. And in his eyes, she was being treated like an outsider. But here's the irony. Meghan was an outsider. And the tiara saga proved it. Meanwhile, Kate sat quietly at Kensington Palace, her own tiara locked away until its next use. To her, the rules were simple. The jewels weren't hers. They belonged to the crown. They weren't to be negotiated, argued over, or demanded. That was the difference between the two duchesses. One accepted the silence of tradition, the other tried to break it. And in breaking it, Meghan exposed just how fragile her standing really was. Now let's add another layer. Did you know that in royal tradition, tiaras aren't just handed out to any woman who marries into the family? They're earned. A bride may wear one for her wedding, yes, but beyond that, the privilege of access is limited. For example, Princess Margaret had her favorites. Princess Diana had her iconic Spencer tiara, one she chose over the Queen's own jewels to make a statement. Kate, too, now rotates between family pieces, each one chosen carefully to symbolize her rising rank. Every jewel tells a story. Every tiara is a chapter in a royal woman's identity. And Meghan wanted her chapter. She wanted it badly. But the gate slammed shut. Here's where the tension really deepens. Meghan's chosen tiara for her wedding ended up being the Queen Mary's diamond bandeau tiara. Beautiful? Yes. Historic? Yes. But was it the tiara Meghan originally wanted? According to palace insiders, no. Meghan had her eyes on an emerald tiara, one dripping with color and drama, perfect for her personality. But she was told no. The emeralds, it turned out, had murky origins. Whispers of Russian aristocrats. Shady backstories. The palace wanted to avoid scandal. So Meghan was denied. And she was not happy about it. Now, imagine being Meghan in that moment. You've conquered Hollywood. You've charmed a prince. You've won over millions. And yet, you're being told you can't wear a jewel because the palace doesn't trust you. Or worse, because they don't trust the jewel. To Meghan, it wasn't about the emeralds. It was about the message, we don't trust you either. And this is where Kate's role comes into sharp focus. Meghan, frustrated, desperate, and angry, allegedly turned to Kate. Why Kate? Because she symbolized everything Meghan wasn't allowed to touch. Kate was the perfect duchess, the future queen, the one woman in Meghan's new world who could open doors or slam them shut. Meghan reportedly reached out, asking for help, maybe even suggesting that Kate lend her one of her own tiaras. It was bold. It was audacious. And it was, perhaps, the first major miscalculation Meghan made. Because Kate's silence wasn't just silence. It was a message. By refusing to engage, Kate aligned herself with tradition. She made it clear she would not, could not, break the rules for Meghan. And in doing so, she didn't just deny Meghan a jewel. She denied her legitimacy. Let me ask you this. If you were in Kate's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have taken pity on Meghan, answered the call, tried to smooth things over? Or would you, like Kate, have stayed quiet, knowing that to bend the rules would be to risk the wrath of the crown itself? It's a tough question, And the answer depends on whether you see Kate as cold or as calculating. But here's the real kicker. This wasn't just a clash between two women. This was a clash between two visions of royalty. Meghan's vision, modern, flexible, glamorous, democratic. Kate's vision, traditional, reserved, restrained, hierarchical. One wanted to rewrite the rules. The other embodied the rules. And when those visions collided, the tiara became the battlefield. And yet, the story didn't end with Meghan's disappointment. It was only beginning. Because while Meghan wore the diamond bandeau tiara on her wedding day, dazzling the world in her Givenchy gown, inside, she was simmering. She knew what had been denied her. She knew the silence Kate had given her, and she would not forget it. Now, dear viewer, here's the question you need to keep in mind as we move forward. Did the tiara war doom Meghan's relationship with the royal family from the start? Was it the moment the die was cast, the point of no return? Because if you believe those closest to the palace whispers, the tiara wasn't just an accessory. It was the opening shot in a war that would tear the royal family apart. And Meghan, humiliated, furious, and silenced, was about to fight back. But how she fought, and how Kate responded, would set the tone for everything that followed. And what happened next would take this feud from private phone calls to public headlines in a way no one could have predicted. Because the unanswered call for a tiara was only the beginning. The real battle was still to come. Imagine being Meghan Markle in those early royal days. The cameras never stopped flashing. The world couldn't get enough of her. Every smile, every wave, every dress choice was dissected by tabloids from London to Los Angeles. To the public, Meghan seemed to have it all. Prince Harry on her arm, royal titles attached to her name, and a wedding that looked like it was pulled straight out of a Disney fairy tale. But behind closed doors, a very different picture was forming. Here was Meghan, the self-made actress from Hollywood, the woman who had fought her way up from small parts in cable dramas to a star role on Suits, suddenly trapped in a world where no amount of charm, wit, or ambition could open the door she wanted. Her new family wasn't impressed by television credits. They weren't dazzled by her celebrity friends. In their eyes, she wasn't a star, she was an outsider. And that outsider status became crystal clear when Meghan realized she couldn't even secure something as simple, as symbolic, as the tiara she wanted. Think about it. For Meghan, the tiara wasn't just a jewel, it was validation. A crown on her head that would declare to the world, I am royal now. I am equal. I belong. Without it, she felt diminished. She felt shut out. And so, in a move some call bold and others call desperate, she reached for the phone. Who did she call? Kate Middleton. Now stop here and let's unpack this. Meghan wasn't stupid. She knew Kate was the golden girl of the monarchy. The perfect wife, the dutiful duchess, the woman who had seamlessly transitioned from commoner to future queen. Meghan also knew that the queen adored Kate. The press adored Kate. William adored Kate. Kate was untouchable. So why, then, would Meghan reach out to Kate? Some believe Meghan thought Kate might empathize. That perhaps, behind the royal facade, Kate would remember her own struggles adjusting to palace life, the headlines mocking her as weighty Katie, the pressure of fitting into an archaic institution. Meghan may have thought Kate would extend a hand. After all, weren't they supposed to be sisters-in-law, allies in a family dominated by powerful men? But others say Meghan's move wasn't about solidarity, it was about strategy. By going directly to Kate, Meghan was trying to bypass the palace machine, to jump the chain of command, to get what she wanted through charm and direct appeal. And here's where it gets interesting. Meghan wasn't just asking for advice. According to whispers, she was asking to borrow a tiara. Kate's tiara. Think about that for a second. Kate Middleton, the woman destined to wear the crown jewels as queen consort, being asked by Meghan to share one of her tiaras. Bold doesn't even begin to describe it. Some say audacious. Others call it desperation. And yet, there Meghan was, allegedly calling, leaving messages, reaching out. The reports claim that she tried multiple times, dialing Kate, hoping for an answer. Each time, silence. Now pause here. Imagine the scene. Meghan pacing in Kensington Palace, phone in hand, heart racing, desperate for a yes. Each unanswered ring growing heavier. Each silence more humiliating than the last. For Meghan, who had been used to agents, assistants, stylists, and producers catering to her every need, This silence must have felt like the ultimate rejection. Here's a question for you. How far would you go if you felt excluded from the very family you had married into? Would you beg? Would you keep calling? Or would you give up after the first rejection? Because Meghan didn't stop. She kept trying. And that is where the desperation becomes clear. But let's not sugarcoat it. Meghan's persistence came across as desperation. And desperation, in the royal world, is dangerous. It reveals weakness. It reveals vulnerability. It reveals that you're willing to bend the rules, to beg, to break the chain of command just to get what you want. For the royals, who thrive on stoicism and restraint, that was a red flag. And so, Meghan's unanswered calls became more than humiliation. They became evidence. Evidence that she wasn't one of them. Evidence that she didn't play by the rules. Evidence that she could never truly belong. Now here's the twist. While Meghan was calling and begging, Kate wasn't alone in her silence. Sources claim she had the full backing of the Queen, that the monarchy itself stood behind her decision to ignore Meghan. In other words, Meghan wasn't just calling Kate. She was calling the Crown. And the Crown was saying no. So ask yourself this. Did Meghan know she was fighting a losing battle? Or did she genuinely believe she could win Kate over? Did she think her charm, her wit, her sheer determination would break down the walls of tradition? Or was she blinded by her own desperation, unable to see that the harder she pushed, the more the palace would push back? Because desperation rarely wins in the world of monarchy. And that, perhaps, is the most heartbreaking part. Meghan didn't understand that silence was an answer. She thought persistence would wear Kate down. Instead, it wore Meghan down, piece by piece, until she was left furious, humiliated, and isolated. And yet, the unanswered calls were not the end. They were just the start. Because Meghan's desperation would soon turn into anger. And anger, when paired with Harry's loyalty and the world's media spotlight, would explode into a feud so intense it would tear the royal family apart. And the next chapter of this feud wouldn't just be about jewels. It would drag Harry, William, and the entire monarchy into the storm. Because when Meghan's calls went unanswered, it wasn't just a snub. It was the beginning of a royal war. But what came next would pit brother against brother, wife against wife, and force the Queen herself to intervene in a way no one saw coming. Silence. It's a weapon sharper than any sword, colder than any icy glare, and far more effective than shouting. And in the royal world, silence is everything. Silence is dignity. Silence is power. Silence is control. And it was silence that Kate Middleton allegedly wielded against Meghan Markle when those calls came through. Imagine the moment. Meghan's phone rings unanswered. Again, 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 each buzz swallowed by the void. To Meghan, it must have felt like rejection, pure and simple. But to Kate, that silence wasn't an accident. It was intentional. It was strategic. And it was devastating. Because if Kate had picked up, if she had even so much as said no, I can't help you, there would have been dialogue. Negotiation. A conversation that Meghan could spin, twist, or use to her advantage. But Kate didn't give her that chance. She left Meghan with nothing. And in the monarchy, nothing is everything. Now here's the key question. Why did Kate choose silence? Was it cruelty? Was it pettiness? Or was it, as some insiders insist, a calculated decision to protect the crown itself? Let's break this down. Kate Middleton wasn't just Harry's sister-in-law. She was, and is, the future Queen of England. Every move she makes is measured, calculated, aligned with centuries of royal protocol. Kate doesn't get to be spontaneous. She doesn't get to bend the rules. She embodies the rules. She has been groomed for years to understand the power of restraint. So when Meghan allegedly picked up her phone and asked to borrow a tiara, or to at least intervene with the palace machinery, Kate faced a choice. She could either step into Meghan's world of improvisation, negotiation, and Hollywood-style persuasion, or she could stand firm in the world of royal silence. Kate chose silence. And here's why that mattered. Silence, in this case, wasn't just a refusal. It was a statement. A loud, unignorable declaration that Meghan was not her equal. That Meghan was not entitled to call her directly about something as sacred as the crown jewels. That Meghan, in Kate's eyes, had crossed a line. Think of it this way. In Meghan's world, persistence was a virtue. In Hollywood, if you wanted a role, you called. If you wanted a deal, you pushed. If you wanted an opportunity, you begged, emailed, showed up. Meghan applied that same hustle to her royal life. But in Kate's world, persistence is weakness. The very act of calling and begging exposed Meghan as someone who didn't understand the rules, someone who wasn't playing the game properly, someone who could never truly fit in. And Kate? She understood this game better than anyone. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. Kate's silence didn't happen in a vacuum. She wasn't just ignoring Meghan out of personal distaste. According to whispers in the palace, Kate had the full backing of the Queen. Elizabeth II herself, known for her own ironclad silence, was said to approve of Kate's approach. After all, the Queen had lived by the rule of never complain, never explain. And Kate, as the model duchess, followed that rule to perfection. So Meghan wasn't just being ignored by Kate. She was being ignored by the monarchy itself. Now pause here and consider. What does that do to someone like Meghan? To be met with silence not just from one woman, but from an entire institution? To realize that no matter how many times you call, the answer will always be the same: silence. It must have been maddening, humiliating, infuriating. And yet, Kate's silence wasn't without risk. By refusing to engage, Kate allowed Meghan to stew, to interpret that silence however she pleased. Was it disdain? Was it strategy? Was it proof that Kate saw her as beneath her? Meghan, left with no explanation, could only fill in the blanks. And those blanks quickly turned into a narrative of betrayal. Let's not forget, Kate and Meghan's relationship was already under strain. Remember the infamous bridesmaid dress incident, where Meghan allegedly made Kate cry? Or was it the other way around? Depending on who you believe, that moment had already created tension between them. So when Meghan's calls went unanswered, it didn't just sting. It confirmed her worst fears, that Kate was not an ally. That Kate was, in fact, her rival. Now let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone ignore your calls, your texts, your pleas? Think of the frustration, the sinking feeling in your stomach, the growing anger. Now amplify that by 1,000, because Meghan wasn't just calling a friend. She was calling the future Queen of England. And Kate's silence? It was deafening. Here's where irony plays its cruel trick. Kate had once been in Meghan's shoes. She had once been the outsider, mocked, scrutinized, doubted. She had once felt the sting of being called common, of having every move questioned. And yet, when Meghan reached out, Kate didn't extend empathy. She extended silence. Some call it hypocrisy. Others call it survival. But whether you see Kate as cold or clever, one thing is undeniable. Her silence worked. Meghan didn't get the tiara she wanted. Meghan didn't get the validation she craved. Meghan didn't get Kate's help. Instead, Meghan got a message. A clear, cutting message: you don't belong here. Not like I do. And that message would fuel everything that came next. Now let's flip the perspective for a moment. Was Kate's silence really about Meghan, or was it about William? About the Queen? About the entire institution? Remember, Kate wasn't acting alone. She was part of a machine, and the machine had no interest in giving Meghan special treatment. By ignoring the calls, Kate wasn't just protecting herself. She was protecting the crown. But protection comes at a cost. Because Meghan, feeling excluded, isolated, and humiliated, didn't retreat quietly. She grew angry. Harry grew angry. And that anger began to poison the brothers' relationship, turning what could have been a minor squabble over jewels into the spark that lit a royal inferno. And here's the chilling truth. Kate's silence didn't end when the calls stopped. It carried on, shaping every icy interaction, every forced smile at public events, every awkward family gathering. Silence became the defining language of their relationship, a language Meghan could never master. So let me ask you again, was Kate's silence an act of cruelty, or was it her greatest act of loyalty to the crown? Was she punishing Meghan, or was she simply refusing to play Meghan's game? Because whichever side you believe, one thing is certain: Kate's silence wasn't just silence. It was power. And that power crushed Meghan's spirit in ways no words ever could. But Meghan wasn't about to let it end there. Because desperation left unanswered doesn't vanish, it transforms. Into resentment, into fury, into rebellion. And what Meghan did next, how she turned her humiliation into confrontation, would shake not just Kate, but the entire monarchy to its core. Because silence may have been Kate's weapon, but Meghan was about to find her own. And what came next would prove that this was never just about a tiara. It was about survival. And no one saw the explosion coming. Weddings are supposed to be joyous. They're meant to be the one day where nothing else matters. No grudges, no rivalries, no hidden politics. But Meghan Markle's royal wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was a global broadcast, a stage where every detail would be dissected, frozen in photographs, replayed for decades. And at the heart of this fairy tale ceremony, behind the veil and the flowers and the pageantry, was one glittering detail that carried more weight than any other. The tiara. Yes, the gown was important. Yes, the vows mattered. But to the monarchy, and to Meghan herself, the tiara was the symbol. It was the ultimate crown of belonging. And it was the jewel that nearly tore everything apart before Meghan even walked down the aisle. Imagine the scene inside Buckingham Palace in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Meghan, eager, impatient, pushing for choices. She didn't just want a tiara. She wanted the right tiara. Something bold, something unique, something that screamed her individuality. The Queen's vault, after all, was legendary. Rows upon rows of tiaras, each one soaked in history, each one worn by queens and princesses of centuries past. For Meghan, the choice wasn't simply about beauty. It was about narrative, about staking her claim to royal history. And that's why, according to Palace Whispers, she set her sights on the emerald tiara. Bright, dramatic, unforgettable. A tiara that would have set her apart from every royal bride before her. But the emerald tiara came with baggage. Rumors swirled about its origins. Russian aristocrats, revolutionary turmoil, jewels with murky pasts. The palace, ever cautious, wanted no part of controversy. The answer was simple, no. But Meghan wasn't accustomed to no. Here's the thing. Meghan had lived her life building her own image. She chose her roles. She styled her red carpets. She crafted her brand. No wasn't a word she accepted easily. And now, just as she was about to marry into the most powerful family in Britain, she was told she couldn't have the tiara she wanted. She was, instead, expected to settle. Settle for the Queen Mary diamond bandeau, a stunning piece, yes, but in Meghan's eyes, it wasn't bold. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't her. Now, let's add Harry into the mix. Imagine Harry, protective, fiery, furious on Meghan's behalf. He had grown up watching the women of his family glide into weddings adorned with jewels. His mother, Diana, had her iconic Spencer tiara. His grandmother, Elizabeth, had her coronation crown. Why should his wife be denied the same freedom of choice? Harry reportedly lashed out, hurling his now infamous line, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." But in the palace? That line didn't fly. In fact, it backfired. Because to the courtiers and staff, Harry's demand wasn't romantic, it was offensive. It reeked of entitlement, of disrespect for tradition. And in their eyes, it confirmed what they had already begun to suspect. Meghan wasn't like Kate. She wasn't content to play by the rules. She wanted to bend them, to rewrite them. And Harry, blinded by love, was willing to break the walls of the monarchy to please her. Now picture the tension at the fittings. Meghan, staring at the tiara she couldn't have. Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser and jewelry gatekeeper, standing firm. Harry, bristling, furious, demanding respect. And in the middle of it all, the Queen herself. Calm, unyielding, absolute. Because here's the truth. When it comes to the crown jewels, only one person makes the final decision. The Queen. And Elizabeth II had spoken. The emeralds were off the table. Meghan would wear the bandeau. End of discussion. But was it really the end? Not for Meghan. Because Meghan carried that rejection with her. On the outside, she smiled, dazzling the world with her sleek Givenchy gown, her sparkling bandeau tiara glinting under the St. George's Chapel lights. But inside, she was simmering. That wasn't the tiara she had chosen. That wasn't the tiara she wanted. And every time she caught her reflection, she knew it. Here's the irony. The bandeau tiara, though not Meghan's first choice, became iconic. To the public, it looked timeless, regal, perfect. But to Meghan, it was a reminder of denial. A reminder of being told no. A reminder that her voice didn't carry the weight she thought it did. Now let's add Kate to the picture. Because while Meghan fumed, Kate remained silent, calm, and radiant in her own tiara. Kate had never argued, never demanded, never begged. She wore what she was given. She followed the rules. She embodied the perfect Duchess. And that comparison? It burned Meghan. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been compared to someone who seems effortlessly perfect while you struggle, fight, and claw your way forward? Imagine the sting. Imagine the humiliation. Meghan wasn't just being denied a tiara. She was being measured against Kate. And in that measure, she was found wanting. Now here's a detail most people miss. At that wedding, the world saw Meghan glowing. But behind the scenes, staff whispered about tantrums, about tension, about tears. Was Meghan difficult? Or was she simply a woman fighting for her voice in a family determined to silence her? That's the question that divides opinion to this day. And this is where the story sharpens. Because the tiara saga wasn't just about jewels, it was about control. The palace had won. Meghan had lost. And Harry, stuck in the middle, had been forced to watch his wife humiliated. That humiliation would fester. It would become resentment. And that resentment would explode later in ways no one could have imagined. But for now, the tiara war was contained, hidden behind Meghan's smile, tucked beneath her veil, sparkling on her head as though everything were perfect. The guests cheered. The cameras flashed. The world swooned. But beneath the glitter, a storm was brewing. And that storm wouldn't just affect Meghan and Kate. It would engulf Harry and William. It would split the brothers apart. It would shake the monarchy to its foundations. Because if the tiara tension taught Meghan anything, it was this: she would never truly belong. No matter how many titles she held, no matter how many cameras adored her, no matter how beautiful she looked, she would always be the outsider. And outsiders don't get crowns. But Meghan wasn't going to accept that fate quietly. Because the rejection she suffered at her wedding didn't kill her fight, it ignited it. And in the days that followed, Meghan's fury grew louder, Harry's loyalty grew stronger, and the palace braced itself for the fallout. Because the wedding may have dazzled the world, but behind the veil, a battle line had been drawn. And the next stage of that battle would drag Prince Harry himself into the center of the storm. Because when Meghan's fury boiled over, Harry was forced to choose. And his choice would change everything. There's a saying that when two queens go to war, it's the men who get caught in the crossfire. And in this story, that man was Prince Harry. Imagine the pressure. On one side, his wife, Meghan, hurt, furious, and demanding his loyalty. On the other, his family, the Queen, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Kate, stoic, silent, and immovable. Harry was torn between love and duty, between passion and protocol. And the tiara war forced him to pick a side. But here's the truth. Harry had already chosen his side. From the moment Meghan came into his life, Harry saw her as his second chance, his redemption, the woman who gave him the family he had always craved but never truly had. Meghan wasn't just his wife, she was his rescue. So when Meghan faced rejection over the tiara, Harry didn't see it as a minor issue. He saw it as yet another example of the monarchy treating the woman he loved unfairly. And Harry snapped. We've all heard the infamous line, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." Those 6 words, reportedly shouted in frustration, became a symbol of Harry's defiance. A declaration of loyalty to Meghan over the institution that had raised him. But behind that line was more than anger. Behind it was years of pain, resentment, and scars from a childhood in the royal machine. Think about Harry's past for a moment. He had watched his mother, Diana, crushed by the same system, now pushing back against Meghan. He had seen her struggle with rules, traditions, cold silences. He had witnessed the toll it took, how it ended in tragedy. So when Meghan was denied, Harry's rage wasn't just about a tiara. It was about history repeating itself. In Harry's mind, Meghan wasn't just his wife. She was Diana all over again. Another woman being told to sit down, stay silent, follow the rules. And Harry wasn't about to let history repeat itself. Not on his watch. But here's the problem. His loyalty to Meghan came at a cost. A cost he may not have fully realized until it was too late. Because when Harry took Meghan's side in the tiara battle, he wasn't just standing up for his wife. He was standing against his brother, against Kate, against the monarchy itself. And that choice would split the family apart. Let's picture the brothers for a moment. William and Harry, once inseparable, bonded by grief, raised in the shadow of Diana's death. They had been each other's anchors, their support through the turbulence of royal life. But the tiara war cracked that bond. William, loyal to tradition, saw Meghan's demands as entitled, arrogant, dangerous. Harry, blinded by love, saw Kate's silence and the Queen's refusal as cruelty. And between them, a gulf opened. For the first time, the brothers weren't aligned. Now ask yourself this. What would you do if you had to choose between your family and your spouse? Who would you betray? The woman you love or the bloodline you were born into? Harry's answer was clear. He chose Meghan. But that choice didn't come without consequences. Insiders whispered about heated arguments between the brothers. About William pulling Harry aside, warning him that Meghan was moving too fast, demanding too much. About Harry lashing back, accusing William of failing to support him, of failing to protect Meghan. What should have been a minor disagreement over a tiara became a wedge that would grow into a canyon. And Kate? She stayed silent. Always silent. But that silence only made Meghan's fury grow louder, and Harry's defenses grow stronger. Think of it like this. Meghan's desperation was the spark. Kate's silence was the oxygen. And Harry's anger was the flame. Together, they created a firestorm that no one in the palace could contain. And yet, here's where things get even more heartbreaking. Harry didn't just see Meghan as his wife. He saw her as his only ally. For years, he had felt like the spare, overshadowed by William, controlled by courtiers, dismissed by his father. Meghan gave him purpose. Meghan made him feel chosen. So when she was rejected, he felt rejected too. Her humiliation was his humiliation. Her pain was his pain. That's why he lashed out. That's why he drew his battle lines. That's why he risked everything for her. But was Harry fighting for Meghan? Or was he fighting his own ghosts? Was this really about the emerald tiara? Or was it about Diana? About years of feeling sidelined? About a lifetime of playing second to William? Because if we're honest, Harry's loyalty to Meghan wasn't just love, it was rebellion. Now let's zoom in on one pivotal moment. The Queen herself, reportedly exasperated by the tiara drama, summoned Harry. She reminded him that the crown jewels were not negotiable. That tradition wasn't up for debate. That Meghan would wear what she was given and nothing more. It was, by all accounts, a direct order from the monarch herself. And how did Harry respond? By digging in deeper. By doubling down on Meghan. By demanding respect that the palace wasn't willing to give. That moment was a turning point. Harry's loyalty to Meghan clashed head-on with his loyalty to the Queen. And in choosing Meghan, Harry set a course that would take him further and further away from his family, from the institution, from the very crown he was born under. Here's the irony. Harry thought he was protecting Meghan, but in standing up for her, he was also isolating her. The more he defended her, the more the palace bristled. The more he lashed out, the more William pulled back. Instead of bridging the gap, Harry widened it. Instead of softening Meghan's image, he hardened it. And Meghan? She saw his loyalty as proof that she was right. Proof that the palace was wrong. Proof that Kate was cold, that William was distant, that the monarchy was stacked against her. Harry's support validated her resentment, and together, they became a united front against the world. But unity can be dangerous when it isolates you from everyone else. Because now it wasn't just Meghan versus Kate. It was Meghan and Harry versus the monarchy. And in that battle, there would be no winners. Let me ask you, have you ever defended someone you loved so fiercely that you didn't see the damage it was doing around you? Have you ever fought so hard for someone that you burned bridges you couldn't rebuild? That's Harry's story. That's the tragedy of his choice. And this brings us to the bigger picture. The Tiara War may have seemed small, petty even, to outsiders. But inside the palace, it was symbolic. It was proof that Harry and Meghan weren't willing to play the game. And in the monarchy, if you don't play the game, you lose. But Harry wasn't ready to accept defeat. He was ready to fight. For Meghan. For their love. For their independence. And that fight would soon escalate. Because while Harry tried to protect Meghan, while he clashed with William and defied the Queen, Meghan's resentment wasn't cooling, it was growing. And that resentment would fuel the next chapter of the feud. Because silence had been Kate's weapon, loyalty had been Harry's. But Meghan? Meghan was about to discover her own weapon. And when she did, the palace would never be the same again. Because what came next would take the Tiara feud out of the shadows and thrust it into the headlines. And no one, neither Kate, nor Harry, nor Meghan, was prepared for the explosion that followed. It started as whispers, subtle tensions behind closed doors, a tiara that never materialized, phone calls that were never returned, Harry's frustration echoing through the palace halls. But soon, what began as private tension began to calcify into something far bigger. This wasn't just about a jewel anymore. This wasn't about a single wedding day argument. It was about rivalry, one that would grow so sharp, so public, and so undeniable that the entire world would soon take notice. Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle were supposed to be a royal dream team. Two glamorous young duchesses, modern, stylish, standing side by side as symbols of a monarchy stepping into a new age. The palace PR machine loved the idea. The public craved it. For a brief moment, people imagined Meghan and Kate as partners, even friends, working together to lighten the monarchy's image and share the burden of duty. But fairy tales rarely last. Because behind the smiling photographs and polite exchanges, there was no warmth, no solidarity, only frost. And the Tiara war made it clear to Meghan. Kate wasn't going to be her ally. She wasn't going to be her friend. She wasn't going to be her bridge into the monarchy. Kate had chosen silence. And that silence, far from neutral, was a clear line drawn in the sand. Now, think about this. What happens when two women, both adored, both scrutinized, both representing different visions of royalty, are forced into the same spotlight? Rivalry becomes inevitable. And when Meghan arrived, she brought something dangerous with her: contrast. Kate was tradition. Meghan was disruption. Kate was restraint. Meghan was ambition. Kate was British aristocracy's chosen future queen. Meghan was Hollywood's self-made outsider. The public couldn't resist comparing them. The press, hungry for drama, stoked the fire. Headlines began to split them apart, praising Kate's quiet dignity while mocking Meghan's diva behavior. Photos of Kate's timeless elegance were placed next to Meghan's daring fashion. Stories of Kate's loyalty to the Queen were contrasted with whispers of Meghan's clashes with staff. Slowly, the narrative hardened. And in that narrative, Kate was always the winner. For Meghan, this was intolerable. She hadn't married a prince to play second fiddle. She wanted to stand on equal footing, maybe even outshine. But every time she tried, the institution clipped her wings, and Kate's shadow grew longer. Let's pause here. Have you ever been compared to someone relentlessly? No matter what you do, you're measured against them, and you always seem to come up short? Imagine the bitterness, the quiet anger building inside. That's what Meghan felt every time she saw Kate celebrated while she was criticized. Now let's revisit one infamous moment: the bridesmaid dress scandal. The story goes that Meghan and Kate clashed over Princess Charlotte's dress during the wedding preparations. The details are murky. Some sources claim Meghan made Kate cry. Others claim Kate made Meghan cry. Meghan herself later insisted it was Kate who reduced her to tears, not the other way around. But here's the truth. It doesn't matter which version is correct. What matters is the symbolism. The image of two duchesses, already tense, breaking down into tears over dresses. It wasn't about fabric. It wasn't about tailoring. It was about dominance. About who held sway in the palace. About who got their way, and who didn't. And once again, Meghan lost. Kate's silence, Kate's dignity, Kate's refusal to play Meghan's game. These became her weapons. And they worked. Because in the court of public opinion, Kate was untouchable. Meghan was volatile. But Meghan wasn't about to surrender. Behind closed doors, she began to fight harder. To demand more. To challenge more. She wasn't going to sit quietly while Kate reaped all the praise. She wasn't going to shrink into the background. Meghan's desperation transformed into defiance. She was determined to force her place in the spotlight, even if it meant going against the palace grain. And Harry? He was caught deeper and deeper in the middle. His loyalty to Meghan meant pushing back against William and Kate, against his own family, against the system he had been born to uphold. What had once been an unbreakable brotherhood between William and Harry now cracked under the weight of their wives' rivalry. Insiders began to whisper about shouting matches, about cold stares between the brothers. William, protective of Kate, saw Meghan as a threat, not just to the monarchy, but to Harry himself. Harry, protective of Meghan, saw William as cold, unsupportive, and blind to her suffering. The Tiara feud had metastasized into a full-scale family war. And Kate? She said nothing, but her silence screamed volumes. Here's the irony. Meghan had hoped to break through to Kate, to create a bond. But instead, she ran into a wall of ice. Kate's refusal to engage, her quiet composure, became the very thing that destroyed any hope of friendship. Meghan was fiery, Kate was calm. Meghan was outspoken, Kate was silent. In the end, it wasn't a clash of personalities, it was a clash of strategies. And Meghan couldn't win against silence. But here's the twist. Silence may win in the palace, but it doesn't win in Hollywood. Meghan had another weapon at her disposal, one Kate would never use. Meghan had her voice, and she was about to use it. Now pause and ask yourself, when silence meets defiance, who wins? The woman who refuses to speak, or the woman who refuses to stay quiet? Because Meghan, backed by Harry, wasn't going to suffer in silence. Not forever. She was about to take her story public. She was about to tell her side. And in doing so, she would drag Kate into the spotlight whether Kate liked it or not. And this is where the rivalry truly crystallized. No longer whispers. No longer subtle. Now it was a narrative. Meghan versus Kate. Kate versus Meghan. Every headline, every photograph, every event turned into a battle. Who looked happier? Who looked more regal? Who wore the crown better? The palace may not have wanted it, but the press made sure of it. And the Tiara war? That was just the opening act. Because soon, this rivalry would explode into the public arena. Interviews, leaks, whispers of betrayal. And in the middle of it all, the monarchy itself, shaken, tested, and forced to choose sides. And the Queen? Even she couldn't silence the storm that was about to break. Because what happened next wouldn't just pit Meghan against Kate. It would pit the palace against Meghan. And when Meghan finally fought back, she wouldn't do it quietly. She would do it with a weapon more powerful than silence. A weapon that would shake the monarchy to its core. But before Meghan took her fight to the world, the press got wind of something. And once the tabloids sank their teeth in, the feud went from private tension to a global media circus. And no one, neither Kate, nor Meghan, nor Harry, nor William, would ever be able to turn back. The palace walls were supposed to be impenetrable. For centuries, secrets had stayed hidden behind gilded gates, whispered in corridors, buried in archives. But when Meghan Markle entered the royal family, the walls began to crack. And through those cracks spilled whispers, rumors, and stories that the press devoured like vultures circling over a fresh carcass. It started slowly. A whisper here, a headline there. But soon, the media frenzy surrounding Meghan and Kate's feud reached a fever pitch. Suddenly, every outfit, every expression, every word between the two duchesses became front-page news. The tiara clash, the bridesmaid dress drama, the cold silences, it all became fodder for a press machine hungry for scandal. Let's be clear, the British tabloids live for this kind of story. Rivalry, jealousy, two beautiful women on opposite sides of tradition. It was the perfect storm. Kate, the polished English rose, the future queen. Meghan, the American outsider, bold and brash. It was Diana versus Fergie all over again, but with higher stakes, bigger audiences, and the internet amplifying every whisper into a roar. And the palace? It stayed silent. Never complain, never explain. That was the Queen's mantra. But silence only made the press hungrier. If the royals wouldn't explain, the tabloids would invent their own narrative. And that narrative quickly took shape. Meghan the diva, Meghan the demanding duchess, Meghan the woman who couldn't fit in. And who was her foil? Kate, the dutiful, elegant duchess who represented everything Meghan wasn't. Now here's the twist. Not all of those leaks came from journalists digging in the shadows. Some came from inside the palace itself. Courtiers, staff, insiders, all whispering stories that painted Meghan in the darkest possible light. Tales of shouting matches with aides. Stories of her 5 a.m. emails. Claims she reduced staff to tears. Whether true or exaggerated, the leaks kept coming. And the more they came, the more Meghan felt betrayed. But who was leaking? That's the million-dollar question. Some fingers pointed at staff loyal to Kate. Others whispered about William's team trying to protect his image. Meghan herself later suggested that palace offices were deliberately planting negative stories about her to distract from others. Whether true or not, the damage was done. Think about it. Meghan, already humiliated by the Tiara rejection, already angry at Kate's silence, now had to watch as her reputation was shredded in the press. Day after day, she opened the papers to headlines that painted her as a tyrant, a diva, a woman unfit for royal life. And who came out glowing in every comparison? Kate. Ask yourself this. How would you feel if every newspaper painted you as the villain while your sister-in-law was cast as the heroine? How long could you stand the humiliation before you snapped? For Meghan, the humiliation was unbearable. And for Harry, it was enraging. Remember, Harry had always had a love-hate relationship with the press. He blamed them for his mother's death. He resented their intrusion into his childhood. And now, he watched as the same machine turned on Meghan, the woman he loved. He couldn't stand it. And yet, there was little he could do. The more he lashed out, the worse the press painted him. The more he defended Meghan, the more the tabloids sharpened their knives. And through it all, Kate stayed silent. Do you see the irony here? Kate didn't need to leak. She didn't need to fight. She didn't need to say a word. The press fought for her. The public adored her. Every time Meghan stumbled, Kate rose higher. Every criticism of Meghan became another jewel in Kate's crown. The result? The rivalry went from private tension to global spectacle. Let's revisit one iconic headline. Kate the peacemaker, Meghan the troublemaker. It summed up everything the press wanted to sell. The perfect contrast. The ideal narrative. The kind of story that sells papers, garners clicks, fuels endless debates on breakfast television. But here's the sinister part. The leaks weren't just stories. They were weapons. Each one chipped away at Meghan's confidence, her reputation, her sense of safety. They turned the public against her, fueling online abuse, hateful comments, and a relentless stream of criticism. Meghan wasn't just losing the battle for jewels. She was losing the battle for image. And image, in the royal family, is everything. But Meghan wasn't going to take it lying down. If the palace thought they could silence her, if Kate thought her silence would win the day, Meghan had another plan. She had her own voice, and she was ready to use it. Because while the press ran wild with anonymous leaks, Meghan was preparing to tell her own story, loudly, boldly, and publicly. Here's the question. Was Meghan reckless for fighting back against the press? Or was she brave? Should she have stayed silent like Kate, endured the storm, and waited for it to pass? Or was speaking out her only weapon in a world that wanted to crush her? Because what Meghan did next shocked the monarchy. She and Harry began pushing back. Statements, interviews, subtle digs. They started to tell their side, even if it meant breaking the golden rule. Never complain, never explain. And once that door was opened, there was no closing it again. But the palace wasn't going to sit quietly while Meghan rewrote the story. Behind the scenes, they tightened the circle. They prepared their defenses. They made sure Kate stayed spotless, untouchable, the jewel of the monarchy. And so, the media war raged on. Meghan versus Kate. Meghan versus the palace. Meghan versus the press. Every leak, every story, every headline turned into another battle. And through it all, Harry was caught in the middle. Angry, loyal, desperate to protect his wife, but powerless to stop the tidal wave of scandal. Until finally, the Queen herself was forced to intervene. Yes, the monarch who had reigned through wars, crises, and scandals was pulled into a Tiara feud that had now spiraled into a family-destroying inferno. And when the Queen stepped in, the stakes changed forever. Because this wasn't just about jewels or dresses anymore. It was about survival. The monarchy's survival. And what the Queen did next would shock Meghan, stun Harry, and cement Kate's place as the untouchable Duchess. But no one could have predicted just how ruthless the crown would be when its authority was challenged.